3 houses, 3 drawers. In the first one, a kitchen drawer, brown wooden handle, dark blade, shoved in behind the potato masher. In the second, a wooden box at a deer camp, same brown handle, same dark blade. Except this one rides in a sheath somebody cut and stitched by hand. In the third, the bottom tray of a metal toolbox in a garage, blade sharpened so many times it has gone narrow and hungry-looking, handle stained nearly black, laying next to a center punch and a set of feeler gauges. 3 rooms, 3 completely different kinds of work. And in a whole lot of American families, the same knife. So here is the question. How does a plain butcher knife, designed to cut meat on a kitchen counter, end up at a hunting camp, end up in a barn, and finally end up in a toolbox next to the wrenches? It was not because it was the finest knife this country ever made. In some ways, it is closer to the opposite. And before we get going, 2 things I want you holding on to. 1. If you just found one of these in a drawer after somebody passed, there is a very common mistake people make in the first 10 minutes, and it erases evidence you cannot put back. 2. The name branded into that wooden handle may not be the name of the company that made your knife. I will get to both. Let us start with what is actually in your hand. A piece of carbon steel, a piece of hardwood, brass compression rivets squeezed through the tang. That is the entire product. No coating, no bolster, no hidden engineering. There is almost nothing here for a salesman to work with. Ontario Knife Company traces the old Hickory kitchen line to 1924, out of Franklinville, New York. You will see 1923 in a few knife histories, tied to the year James Christensen became president. Close enough that I am not going to pretend I can settle it, and far enough apart that I am not going to hide it from you either. What matters more is the design brief. Nobody bought one of these to admire it. It was the working knife a farm kitchen or a butcher shop could actually afford, sold in a hardware store next to hinges and hoof picks. It was not built to impress the buyer. It was built to disappear into the work. And that turns out to be the whole reason it traveled. Now, the handle. Here is where a lot of family stories go sideways, and almost nobody sees it coming. Go get your knife. Look at the wood. It probably says Old Hickory, branded right into the scale. Now turn it over, and look at the blade. There is a very good chance it does not say Ontario at all. There is a whole population of these knives out there, where the handle is branded Old Hickory, and the blade is stamped Shapley's Hammer Forged. Shapley Hardware Company, St. Louis, Missouri. Augustus Shapley built one of the biggest wholesale hardware houses in the country. The business traces back to 1843. They are the Diamond Edge people. They bought out Simmons Hardware in 1940, which is how they wound up owning Keen Cutter too. The firm closed around 1960. And here is the part that trips people every single time. Those Shapley blades are often stamped with dates. You will see 1843 by itself. You will see 1843 to 1934. That is not the year your knife was made. 1843 is the year Shapley opened for business in St. Louis. It is a trademark. It is advertising. It is the same instinct as a beer label bragging about 1869. I have watched people carry a knife around for years, believing it dated to the 1840s, because the number was right there on the steel, plain as day. The number was real. The conclusion was not. Collectors will also tell you, Old Hickory turns up as a hardware store brand from more than one seller. The name gets attached to John Primble, out of the Belknap catalogs, in those same discussions. I am telling you that as collector conversation, not as a documented corporate record, because I could not put a factory document behind it. But the practical lesson does not need the documents. Old Hickory is a brand name on a handle. It is not, by itself, proof of who made your knife. Read the blade before you decide the story. All right, back to why this thing traveled. Pick up a traditional Old Hickory butcher pattern, and the first thing you notice is what is missing. Weight. Current retailer listings on the 7-inch butcher put blade thickness right around 1/10 of an inch, with a full flat grind. That is a thin blade. That is a slicer. And that geometry is the quiet reason a kitchen knife could walk out the back door. A thin, flat ground blade goes through meat. It goes through connective tissue instead of shoving it. It does not need mass to do ordinary cutting work. Now here is the part people get wrong when they argue about this online. The question a farmer or a hunter was actually asking was never how long will this stay razor sharp. It was, can I get this working again tonight, with the stone I already own? Plain carbon steel says yes to that question. Every time. A word of caution on steel, because I would rather be useful than confident. Look at retailer listings for the exact same 7-inch butcher knife today, and you will find one page calling it $10.95 and another page calling it $10.75. Hardness gets listed as 53 on one page and 53 to 58 on another. If the listings for a knife you can buy this afternoon do not agree, be very careful with anybody who tells you exactly what steel your grandfather's knife is. Now, we get to the part I think is the real answer. It is not the steel. It is not the grind. It is the price. Think about what an expensive knife does to a person's behavior. You protect it. You do not want to scratch it. You do not leave it at the cabin. You do not try a strange job with it. You certainly do not hand it to a 14-year-old. An expensive knife makes you careful. Old Hickory did the exact opposite. It was cheap enough to use every single day, cheap enough to buy a second one, cheap enough to leave one at camp permanently and forget about it, cheap enough to use on hog butchering day, cheap enough to put a new handle on when the old one split, cheap enough to keep using after it got ugly. Today, cheap means throw it out when it wears. Back then, cheap meant something closer to, I can afford this, so I can afford to use it hard. Its low price did not shorten its life. In a lot of families, the low price is exactly what gave it more lives. Nobody was protecting this knife. Everybody was using it. Which brings us out of the kitchen. I want to be careful here, because there is a version of this story that turns into frontier mythology, and I am not interested in that. So let us stay with what owners actually describe. Go read long-running knife forum discussions from people who grew up on farms, and you find the same picture over and over. Home butchering was a scheduled event, not an adventure. Meat saws for the bone, and the cutting done with a 10-inch butcher knife, an 8-inch boning knife, and whatever else was on the table. Notice what that means. For a rural family, the kitchen and the farm were never two separate worlds. The same knife handled supper on Tuesday and helped process an animal on Saturday. So once a knife had already proven itself on butchering day at home, carrying one just like it out to deer camp was not a revolutionary idea. It was barely an idea at all. And this is where the timeline gets interesting. Ontario put out a press release in the spring of 2020, introducing the Old Hickory hunting knife, 5.5-inch high-carbon blade, hardwood handle, brass compression rivets, 55 to 57 on the hardness scale. In that release, the company's vice president of sales and marketing said they wanted to add a hunting-style blade to a series that was already popular and trusted among outdoorsmen. Already. Now hold that word up against the record. 2005. A knife forum thread asking whether an Old Hickory butcher would work as a camp knife. The answers include a man describing using one on deer, and on a hog, a friend of his killed. 2007. Another thread, owners reporting they used the butcher pattern as a field knife and a boning knife for deer. 2009. A side-by-side comparison where the writer took a 7-inch Old Hickory butcher and a purpose-built hunting knife and put each one through its own deer. 2012. Owners using the line for processing in the field. Hunters did not wait for a company to tell them Old Hickory was a hunting knife. They had settled that question 15 years earlier, on their own, with their own animals. Ontario did not create that market. Ontario noticed it. That is a very different story, and I think it is a better one. Now, the third life. This is the part almost nobody talks about. A blade that has been sharpened down for 40 years, with a damaged tip, a stained handle, and too much history to look right on a dinner table, does not usually get thrown away. It gets demoted. It goes out to the shop. It becomes the knife you open a bag of feed with. The knife you scrape a gasket with. The knife that lives in the toolbox because it is already too ugly to ruin. And I want to be precise about the evidence here. What we can document is owners describing this. One collector, showing 3 of his own old hickories, described the bottom one plainly. Found mixed in with his father's old tools after his father died. That is a real account from a real owner. What I am not going to tell you is that this was a universal American tradition, or that every worn butcher knife in a toolbox has a story like that. That would be me filling a gap with a nice sentence. Documented pattern, not proven custom. But it does explain something. The knife stayed in the family partly because nobody could ever find a good enough reason to throw it out. Not sentiment, just a series of small decisions where the trash can lost. All right, time to pay off the first thing I asked you to hold on to. Go look at your blade. Carbon steel changes color. That is not a defect. That is the material doing what it does. Here is how to tell the difference between the two things you are looking at. Stable patina tends to be gray, blue-gray, sometimes purple, sometimes near black. It is smooth under your fingertip. It is bonded to the steel. Active corrosion tends to be orange or red-brown. It is rough. It sits up above the surface. It flakes. It can leave a pit behind. And there is a test you can run right now, in your kitchen, that settles it in about 5 seconds. Wet a corner of a paper towel. Wipe the discolored area. If the towel comes away with an orange-brown smear, you are looking at active rust, and that needs attention. If nothing transfers, that is patina, and it is protecting the steel underneath. Dark does not automatically mean damaged. Shiny does not automatically mean better. Which brings me to the mistake. Somebody passes. The family cleans out the house. Somebody opens a drawer, finds the old dark knife, and the very first instinct is to make it look nice again. Steel wool, sandpaper, sometimes a wire wheel. And in about 4 minutes, the wear pattern is gone. The stamp is gone or half erased. The evidence of that knife's whole working life is on the garage floor. The version of that knife, sitting in your hand right now, is the only one that will ever exist. It stops existing the moment you improve it. So, before anything else, photograph both faces of the blade. Photograph the whole outline against a plain background. Photograph the markings with the light coming in from the side, not straight on. Photograph the handle branding. Photograph the rivets. Photograph the wear. Do not wash it first. Do not oil it first. Photograph it dirty. Then go ask the people who are still around. Whose was it? Where did it live? What did they use it for? Did anybody ever put a new handle on it? Those answers disappear faster than the steel does. I put all of that on paper for you. It is called the Old Hickory Family Knife Field Guide, Photo Checklist, the patina comparison, the marking checklist, and 7 questions to ask your relatives before the answers are gone. It is free, it is printable, and the link is in the description. Now let me give you the identification ladder, and let me be honest about where it stops. Start with the maker mark on the blade. Ontario. Ontario Knife Company. Shapley's. Something else entirely. Then the handle branding. Then any extra wording. A lot of older examples carry a true edge marking alongside the name. That tells you that you are probably looking at an older example. It does not hand you a decade. Then the pattern. Butcher, boning, slicer, paring, cleaver. Blade length and profile narrow the model considerably. Then construction. 2 rivets or 3. Collector's note both exist on the Shapley branded knives. Then, and only then, compare against period catalogs. And here is the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Case collectors have it easy. Case publishes a Tang stamp chart. You match your stamp to a chart, and you get a range. There is no equivalent factory-published chart for Old Hickory. So when somebody looks at your knife and confidently names a decade, understand what is actually happening. They are pattern matching against knives they have seen. That is not worthless. But it is not a chart. and it is not a document. A marking can narrow the search. It does not always finish the search. Now, the part of this show that matters most to me. What we could not verify. First, those rolled or hammered-looking marks you see on some blades. People have been asking what they actually are for years. I found a forum thread where a man said outright he had gone looking for why the steel was rolled with that pattern and had not found the answer. Nobody in the thread had it either. I could not find a factory explanation, so I am not going to give you one, and I would be careful with anybody who dates a knife on that alone. Second, the Shapley date pairs, 1843 to 1934. Collectors have been arguing about what the second number actually marks, and I did not find a document that settles it. Third, who made the Shapley branded blades? Shapley was a wholesale hardware house. Hardware houses generally bought from manufacturers and put their own name on the goods. I could not confirm the specific cutlery maker behind those knives. I have not found evidence. That is not the same as proven false. And it is a lot more honest than making something up to fill the gap. One last thing, and it changes how the ending lands. That factory in Franklinville, New York. The building that had been turning out these knives since before the First World War. It closed. In 2023, the parent company sold Ontario Knife Company. The buyer was Blue Ridge Knives, a distributor down in Virginia. The name, the designs, and the inventory went with the sale. The Franklinville plant did not survive it. More than 50 people lost their jobs. The brand is still alive. The building is not. Which means the knife in your kitchen drawer has now outlived the factory that made it. So let us go back to those three rooms. The kitchen drawer, the deer camp, the toolbox. I do not think those are three different knives. I think, in a lot of families, they are three stages of the same knife. It got bought because it was cheap. It got used because it was cheap. It went outside because it was already proven and nobody was afraid of it. It got repaired instead of replaced. It got demoted instead of discarded. And somewhere in all of that, it quietly stopped being a tool and started being an object the family kept. Some expensive knives survive because nobody ever used them. Old Hickory survived because somebody always did. So here is what I want you to do tonight. Before you clean the old carbon steel knife in your father's drawer or your grandfather's toolbox, photograph it. Then read the blade, not just the handle. The printable guide is free in the description. And then tell me in the comments, where did your family's old Hickory live? The kitchen drawer, the hunting camp, the barn, or somewhere stranger than that? I read every one of them.